Welcome to the Crossing the Stream podcast after quite a deliberated rebooting.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Reboots are still really popular, and this is a reboot of a continuation.
Basically, just after we rebranded to this podcast name, we ran into a couple snags that had a lot to do with workflow.
Yeah.
Just the overall time that it takes to create one of these and how many we wanted to produce as far as volume went. We've overcome that hurdle in quite an interesting way at this point.
Yeah, through no skill of our own.
No. The AI revolution is among us. We now have a tool in our arsenal that can significantly cut down the time it takes to produce something of this quality. Specifically, the thing that used to take a lot of time was the whole process of switching cameras to focus on whoever's talking, whether it be an individual or a group. We used to use the Adobe Premiere multicam feature. That was just a manual thing where you'd have to watch through the entire podcast and hotkey each camera. So you would switch based on whoever's talking.
Which, it was an awesome feature. It felt it is a professional feature that's very similar to how you would do live television. You would have all your cameras queued up and you would say, take camera 1, take camera 2. So it was very, very similar to that. But the fact of the matter is, if
television people have the motivation of being paid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you take into consideration the fact that, we are at, I can't even remember how many episodes there are of this, but there's a ton of hours put into it.
Of course.
And every hour takes at the very least an hour of time to edit. So,
yep. The one-to-one scaling was not really working, considering the volume we were trying to output was 5 podcasts all in one day in the best case scenario. Sometimes they would be, an hour and a half or something like that. So that's a lot of time sitting behind a computer. That's an entire day's worth of work, which usually we wouldn't be able to just roll it into one day. It's kind of an inconvenient thing.
I used to be able to do it. I used to be able to edit podcasts the night that we would shoot them, because we didn't used to shoot 5 in a day, with one at a time.
Yeah.
And I used to be able to edit them after we shot them. But there was an inherent flaw with that, which I wasn't willing to risk. This time, it was the fact that it hurt interpersonal relationships a lot, because there was a lot of time spent editing my and your face.
And now, for a variety of reasons, we're both more busier adulty people than we were previously. So, yes, things have changed.
But it's a good thing, but it's also good to be able to go back to this, and it's nice, as we have been talking about. At one point, we were even talking about finding somebody to program it for us.
Yeah. The possibilities have changed. Now we could use AI to write the program that could also make this application.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm probably not very effectively. We could try, because I'm not terribly good at programming, but it could happen.
It could.
I guess enough about the podcast-centric stuff, and if we haven't already bored everybody to death by talking about this, I have a specific card to play to add some interest. I have brought with me some supplies.
Oh boy.
So, recently, I have got into the process of distillation, as I have way too many hobbies. These are only half-shot glasses, and I'll fill them halfway, so it's kind of a quarter shot. This first glass is home distilled vodka. Not really traditional vodka. It's not even made from grain. It's more of like a sugar wash for anybody that knows anything about distillation. So it's a flavorless alcohol for the most part. It's very simple. What does it smell like to you, Jesse?
If you blindfolded me, I wouldn't have said that it smells like vodka.
Does it strike you as anything else?
It smells like tequila.
Tequila, really? Well, I suppose tequila made from the nectar of like an agave fruit, so that's kind of just sugar. So it might have some similarities to it. If somebody's a distilling expert, they could probably determine what the taste difference would be. I will make tequila at some point, because it is possible to get the syrup. But yeah.
I say tequila.
But yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Tell me if it tastes like vodka.
That is the smoothest vodka I've ever drank.
Real? Yeah? My basis of comparison,
There was no recoil on that. That is dangerously good.
it's 43% alcohol, so it would be pretty dangerous. That's exciting. Okay, because I'm not a big fan of vodka. I don't particularly even just like enjoy what I just drank for the most part. It doesn't have anything for me. I suppose the purpose of vodka is more just mixed with stuff, and there's some people that are crazy that drink it straight. If I had to pick one that stands out, I like Tag number 5 the most out of anything I've ever had, but like Polar Ice is crap and Smirnoff is crap, and for me, they just don't do anything for me.
That was really good.
Well, I can make a ton of it. Producing your own alcohol is very, very cheap, to the point that I don't think I would buy alcohol anymore now that I know how
Actually,
simple it is.
that was really good.
Okay, well then you're in for a treat because I have something else.
Oh my God.
See, this is why I brought smaller glasses, so that way we don't get hammered today.
What is this?
This is rum. Made from basically a fermented thing of molasses and some brown sugar and some white sugar in a different ratio, whatever somebody recommended to me on the internet, essentially. Of course, it is not aged. It is a clear spirit at this point. But to me, this is a lot more exciting. This is something that I'd like to drink on a recurring basis. It's got the rum smell to me.
It does. This smells more like rum than that did of vodka. It also smells stronger too.
Which it's not. I'm going to try to go probably to 43% for everything until I actually come up with a reason to change the percentage alcohol in anything I make. Just because when you go to like the LCBO, most of the things you see are between 40 and 45. It's kind of the middle ground. I don't know if there's an advantage to either. Hopefully I come close. But cheers. Yep. Mix it with some Coca-Cola and you got a Cuba Libre. A little lime to it or something.
Again, no recoil on that.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I sort of...
And I I don't mind drinking whiskey straight, vodka straight, rum straight. So I know, but that... Wow.
That's way more of an endorsement than I was hoping to even get.
I will endorse. This is Jesse approved. I am Jesse and I approve this vodka.
Well, the quantities I'm thinking about making it in should set me up for the rest of my life if I accomplish all the bottles. I just got to buy all the bottles and at that point stick it away in storage, maybe have some barrels so I can age stuff. But yeah, I plan on making most likely some gin next because it's kind of similar to vodka, plus, just adding in some juniper berries and some other spices.
I like gin.
I like gin more than vodka, definitely. And not every gin. I don't like Tanqueray. I don't like a few of them here and there, but there are some I don't like Bombay.
It's a challenge. If you make a gin that I like, you've won.
Okay.
You are the Willy Wonka of alcohol.
If you don't like juniper berries, then there's nothing really to help you. But you can spice gin with lots of other things to enhance the flavor. And I'll probably make some whiskey. That's kind of messy for the most part. Like the mash is quite it makes sense you wouldn't want to do it in massive volume just to get the messiness out of the way. But I'll have to deal with it at home and come up with a system for it. Kind of my basis for testing is just using like 5-gallon carboys. So I find that out of one of those, I can produce about 8 bottles of spirits, maybe a little more. The little more that I usually keep in like a mason jar or something just for my own tasting, because the rest of it I'm going to put in storage for however long. But yeah, it's an interesting hobby.
Well, I too have started making. I'm kidding.
This shouldn't taste good because I haven't done one of the key things that a person who's good at distilling should do, which is you would separate the run as it's going through a condenser and dripping into your collection container. You'd separate it into many separate jars, for example, and the beginning of where it's dripping, the heads, should taste different than the hearts, which is next, the good part people typically talk about, and the tails at the end also taste different. Tails kind of has a very burnt taste to it. Like I can definitely taste the difference as it's coming out, but I have mostly mixed stuff together. Like the heads and the hearts are all there. The tails, I I cut off and I run into my next batch, essentially. I don't really know what the best process is, so it's avoiding most of that burnt taste, but it's by no means like the selection of the best alcohol. Which would be the cleanest tasting out of all of them. Plus, I'm learning lots of things about how you can distill things multiple times to get a much cleaner flavor, which I did with the rum, because the first pass was rough. It was really, really bitter at the end, because it still had a lot of like the molasses in it. Yeah, it's neat. I only have a small setup. I think it says that it's a 5-gallon sort of pot for boiling and a really tiny condenser, that the only way you can use it is running tap water through it continuously. So for like 6 to 8 hours, I have the tap running and just, trickling out water to keep it cool. Whereas like a big setup, you'd have something that's a little bit more practical than that. Yeah, it's a fun hobby. Anybody that wants to get into it, I think, should give it a shot.
And there's nothing like there's no gray area, right? You're allowed to make your own.
We are in Canada. You can home distill. You can't sell alcohol, so that's pretty much a given, unless you're like, a licensed distillery or something like that.
But you can give it to friends, right?
I think so. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's even... I wonder if there's any laws regarding the amount that you transport. Because, like, you're only allowed certain amounts of tobacco in your personal possession and cannabis for transportation purposes and things like that. But I don't know about alcohol as far as the amount you can transport. Because at some point, it's got to look like trafficking, I'd imagine.
Probably.
It's a serious thing, too, in the sense that, like, I don't think people mess it up too often these days, but if you kept all the methanol in the batch, you could have something that would poison people. So you definitely don't want somebody that messes that part up. Although it's incredibly simple, it feels like, to get that out. I've learned a lot about how certain fruits that have a lot of pectin in it are the main sources of methanol. So depending on what you're fermenting, you might not even generate much to begin with. But there's sort of a ratio of the batch that you should throw out at the beginning just to be safe. And if you go over it, then at least you're being precautious at that point. Yeah. It's not much either. Just like, I think in some of the volumes that I would distill at, it would be basically like half an ounce of methanol. Yeah. So just a tiny, tiny little.
Well, it's a very you project.
I don't know. I think it's because I bounce from so many different hobbies to hobby all the time. Some of the ones that are, they come back. It's like in waves. Like right now, photography is king again, back like when I was in university.
But you're so good at it. And that's not like just me. It's just you have a real eye, A, for the technical side, and B, for the creative side.
The main thing that we can show, if you do want to throw some editing into this mix, is some cannabis photography, because that's the main thing that I've been doing, because I have a professional reason to do so. I've been working for a cultivation company, and I would basically be their marketing guy. So I did a lot of the pictures of the crops and the dried product and those kind of things. And I think I've selected maybe about like 30 images that are kind of the best of the best from that, which I had a lot of fun. Using the equipment I had, for the most part, I was able to get some pretty good shots. There's some cool things that I'd like to get, like maybe a tilt shift lens or something like that eventually. But for the most part, it was a fun photography to do. It kind of got me back into it in a sense. Now, I don't really work for that company anymore. I'm more of an independent contractor, but there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon for that.
And it's a self-employed life. I'm a fan.
Yeah. It's so much better. Like, I don't know how, it's been so long since I've just stayed up until like midnight, just working on creating like all like the list of all my assets and all these different things, and just like organizing a business. It keeps you up. It actually gives you like a reason to feel involved in your work.
Oh, 100%. That's why, like, for me, the work never stops.
Yeah.
I
With the wedding stuff, it was kind of seasonal. So I would catch the bug occasionally and stay up late editing or doing whatever, but like, it was in such small bursts.
For now, until we no longer have to edit our own photos because of AI.
Yeah. I suppose that's an interesting thing too. Like, I would have a lot of reason to talk to people specifically in the marketing departments of anything now, because they would be the person you talk to as a photographer to try to get some commercial work, some promotional stuff, do social media for various companies. there's a big incentive now to talk to those kinds of people for me, which is, yeah, it's kind of funny, like being a marketer and now mainly trying to assist people doing marketing. But
networking is super important.
yeah, absolutely. I have a friend currently who is like a Uber driver, and that is a very unique person to talk to because they get in contact with all sorts of people that have nothing specific in common. And yeah, there's definitely some people that are high up in companies and people you wouldn't necessarily just expect to meet on a day-to-day basis. But of course, if you're an Uber driver, you get to sit in a cab basically with them for an hour or more sometimes, depending on if you're going to Toronto or, some big meeting or something. So you get a lot of cool contacts that way.
100%. That was when I was doing baby photos, that was always fun because you never knew who you were going to meet. So you'd meet just random stay-at-home moms, which was the norm, but then occasionally you'd meet somebody that, owns races cars professionally, that type of thing. Or
think if you had like a selective bias too, like you were specifically doing some kind of high-end photography that only the rich would do. Now you have a totally different subset, right? Or yeah, like specifically you're going to be talking to a lot of mothers when it comes to baby photography. There's a lot more that could focus on up-and-coming businesses. Like say if you did food photography and you wanted to start at the ground level, which is like working with small restaurants or something like that, you'd get to meet a lot of entrepreneurs that might be going somewhere. It's kind of amazing to see what the real big world of commercial food photography looks like, because that's one of them that there's just huge campaigns for like billboards and international advertising and things. Very big leap from, small restaurants to that. Pretty much they have nothing to do with each other, but that's kind of where I've realized some of the biggest money in photography is.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny, as you get bigger in food photography, the food gets faker and more stylized. Like you do a photo for
Depends.
Yeah. You do, not that it's, the most high end, but if you were to get a photo shoot with McDonald's, that Big Mac is going to be propped on stilts and the cheese is melted with a heat gun. And
I think there's a level to it where at least if the ingredients are authentic, like I don't have a problem with it. Of course, you put a lot of work into how you present it and every bit of detail on making it look good.
Of course.
And the person, your burger artist in the back is probably not going to put that level of attention to detail in it. But there's funny videos from years past where people have gone in and say, can you make it look like this? And they sometimes can get pretty close.
Oh,
if they put the effort in.
My years at A&W, we were able to make some pretty close to picture perfect burgers.
Yeah. That's almost like a thing that restaurants could do individually. Like if you have a franchise, why don't you promote yourself by making the one that looks like the burger ad? Because now people can associate you with that quality image, because that quality image usually looks pretty delicious.
Yeah.
Jesus, we're going to leave this place and go get A&W probably. I haven't eaten dinner yet, so that's my problem. If you could start, is there like a hobby in the back of your mind that you haven't started yet, or maybe you've just started, that you want to do, you want to get deep into?
If it was a brand new hobby, I would have to think about it, because thankfully I'm able to do a lot of the things that I do enjoy, just sometimes with a weird schedule. But if I was thinking about things that I used to do that I would like to do again, I would like to get back into some sort of stage hypnotism.
That's a wild one. Okay, I wouldn't have expected that.
I've been thinking about it so frequently in the past 6 months about how wild being on stage doing that was.
There's a certain high, like an exhilarating feeling of being sort of the center of attention and putting on a performance for people.
But that's the nice thing about it, because I wasn't ever the center of attention, because the people on stage, the friends and family of the people in the audience on stage, they were the center of attention. So I was just a liaison for laughs. So I enjoyed it because it was funny too. It was interesting. And I think I would do better now than I did when I was a teenager, because A lot of the jokes that I made as a teenager, they just simply didn't land. I feel like I'd be able to land the jokes a lot better now.
Understanding comedic timing and things like that better would make a huge difference.
Yes.
And sort of knowing what's good. That's a critical feature. I feel like that's a lot of things that are artistic or like expressive is just eventually getting something you could call taste.
Yeah.
Everybody starts out producing crap. You gotta figure out what's the crap and what's the good stuff.
It'd be a really hard thing to practice, though, because I would need to, like, find willing participants to undergo my practice route.
Seeing the kind of things that show up in our local venue, like Showtime and stuff, I'm sure that, like, you could find a slot where you have some time to have a big enough audience that there's going to be some volunteers and things like that. And the practice being in front of people is not as much practice, but I mean, it's some way of doing it. Like, you're not starting from zero.
No, but if you told me right now, go up on stage and hypnotize somebody, I haven't thought about the techniques or the strategy or even like the scripting. So I would need to go through it a little bit.
Sounds like you need to join like a club, like a hypnotist club.
You know, there's not many of them out there.
Like close to Toronto, relatively.
Well, yes.
If you want to take it seriously, I'm sure there's one there.
Well, yes, there would be. Some of arguably the world's best hypnotist is from Toronto, but that's a very subjective title.
Yeah, I suppose it would be. To be fair, I don't even know a single hypnotist name.
Well,
does Chris Angel do hypnotism?
Mentalism.
Okay.
But Mike Mandel.
Mike Mandel.
That is a hypnotist name.
Okay.
He's from Toronto. He used to perform at the CNE all the time. And I remember I went and I was in grade 7. And I was at the CNE. We saw some of the shows and then like, oh, we'll see a hypnotist. And I have never been more floored by a performance than seeing him perform. Because I used, and I still do, I like magic tricks, card tricks, and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's fake. You are tricking people, right? So there is an element of illusion and lying there. Mm-hmm. And I watched his show and I thought, this is magical to watch. But I mean, at the time, it's still considered kind of like a pseudoscience type thing. But at the time, I thought it's science. It's all mental.
It's an exploit of the human consciousness.
Yes. So I went to Tillsonburg's last bookstore and had to order in this book called Hypnotize Your Friends in 60 Minutes or Less.
Wow.
I still have it.
That's a big sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 months later, it hadn't worked. So the 60 minutes or less was a bit of a lie, a bit of a stretching of the truth. Yep. But one time in grade, I can't even remember the grade. I was doing it at a recess, and I was going through like page after page. I was reading from the book with 3 people sitting on a bench, and nothing was happening until the end when one person on the side kind of went, huh. Like they went out of it for a second. And that was that. I got better, right? If the entire performance was just 12 people going, it wouldn't be very good. But that alone was like, okay, there is something. And I learned. And then one snow day in high school, the teachers, for some weird reason, gave me permission to do it to some of the students in class. And when they were on the floor, the teachers quickly realized that they shouldn't allow me.
We've given this child too much power.
Yes. But in college, everything was different. So I was able to do it freely, and I performed, and it was fun.
Funny how that changes when you get to like higher education, like things become less restrictive in most ways.
No, it was still restricted. I got in trouble doing it.
I feel like in university, they probably would not care. Like many professors bragged about, I don't know, on the last day, we could all get beers together or like bring a 24 case to lecture and somebody, like people would basically win a beer if they got stuff right or something. It was just... It seemed very free. I don't know.
So, the reason why I got in trouble is not my fault, I don't think. Is if I...
Yeah.
The reason why I got in trouble was because somebody under the... when somebody was under, so to speak, we were doing somewhat suggestive... not suggestive, but we were in the throes of hypnosis, so to speak, and somebody suggested that I say, when you wake up, you are going to think that there's something inappropriate in your hair.
Okay.
Like,
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get it. Okay.
what I didn't realize is this lady loved her hair. Like, you couldn't touch it.
So she was devastated.
She was devastated, and it was fine. There was obviously nothing in her hair. I snapped her out, everything is fine. But then I got a letter
Oh my God.
saying I was not allowed to perform because of sexually explicit content, which it wasn't, because that literally the way I said it to you right now is the way it was worded, because I always tried to toe the line between being clean and having a little bit of a dirty edge.
I'd be too tempted to push the limits like every chance that I got.
It gets weird though. Like, on stage at the college, the furthest I would get was giving people orgasms with a handshake. But I couldn't say, I was like, when I shake your hand, it's going to be the most pleasurable handshake.
That is an incredibly powerful thing if it is actually happening to somebody.
You could tell.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm
Like,
skeptical.
well, no, like, mentally it happened. I'm not saying they were
Just jizzing in their pants like
no.
like a Lonely Island music video.
No, but no. If a certain percentage of orgasms are mental, they were mentally there.
As they have a certain percentage of orgasms or performance. Maybe they were there.
So
There's some authenticity to it.
yeah,
I suppose I have something to tie in. If there's anybody who's like a long time viewer, they'll know that I have just an act for like completely changing the topic on a dime. And it's not because I have like ADHD or something. I think that it's because I don't have a sense of a very different sense of how things should flow together, and I can feel when things are kind of getting boring and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's related to a realization very late in my life that I have a lot of autistic traits. And that's interesting to me because I didn't put all this together until last September in 2022, just because I didn't look like anybody I knew that was diagnosed with autism. But it turns out there's so many different things that qualify for that. And a few of the things, too, is just literally maintaining eye contact with these cameras, even though they're not eyes, is still kind of difficult. Or maintaining eye contact with another person is a difficult process. Things like my very monotone speech pattern, those kind of fit into it. Just a lot of little things here and there. I suppose the way that they used to describe high-functioning autists in sort of this category would have been people with Asperger's syndrome, which is like which is interesting because it's not actually like a issue with being social in the way that people thought it was. People who were socially destructive or people that like didn't want social interaction, but it's kind of the opposite, where we want a lot of social interaction, but it's difficult to do it because we can't pick up on things like social cues and just other information in people's faces and expressions that other people kind of rely on, and literally have a conversation with subtext, conversations with things that are not actually the words that are coming through their mouth. Yeah. No, I think that describes a lot of relevant behavior to previous podcast sessions too. No comment on the neurodivergence?
I've known you for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's 7 years this year.
Yeah.
And I never, ever once would have thought that was the case. I thought you were just a unique individual that thought a little differently.
Yeah.
And I like people that think.
That's the interesting thing too, is it explained a lot of the differences that, like the inability I've had essentially to be a leader in some contexts, because people who are autistic do not make, generally speaking, good leaders, because people do not look at them for approval in some way. Like if there's a group of people and say they're all trying to go to a restaurant or something like that, if the autistic person speaks up and has an opinion, they don't usually have the kind of, maybe it's charisma, maybe something just basically that makes them this distinctive but unspoken leader of the group. So that if you have a good idea, those people are all going to look towards the actual natural leader of the group for their opinion. And if that person approves, then of course you might get your way with what you wanted to do. But as a side part of that is, even if they're not necessarily good leaders, autistic people make very good innovators because they think in a different way. They have very little hang-ups about social norms and other things that people kind of take for granted, which explains a lot of my attitudes about like religion and different like preservation of not just culture, but like, what's the word for traditions? Yeah. I don't really care about any kind of traditions that people put a lot of stock into. People have a lot of significant feelings about things like Christmas or like Halloween or like all these things. I don't. Like I could take it or leave it. They're good. I don't really need a specific day of the year that, I'm allowed to feel these things and do these things. It seems kind of arbitrary to me. Yeah. Also has a lot to do with, I suppose the adaptation that I've had regarding people like not being a very good leader, people not typically listening to me, is just being a person who says yes to basically everything. A person who, if somebody is a leader and I want to have, fun interactions with them, I'm just going to go for anything, go for whatever, because people who make decisions are useful because at least decisions get made. If I'm with somebody who doesn't make decisions, but they're also not willing to listen to me, nothing ever happens, right? It's kind of a conundrum.
And here's me, I mean, even from first meeting you, or like the first time that we actually had like a back and forth personal interaction, I looked up to you intently. I mean, never in a position where you were a leader to me in some way, but I looked up to your approval like what I would to a leader.
What I had was a very specific amount of expertise in photography, which is the thing that you were selecting me by.
Yes.
The thing that you were going to hire me based on. Mostly because I suppose a lot of people would feel awkward or embarrassed with the idea of what I did, which was carry a camera around my neck every single day, everywhere that I went for over 3 years. Like, not in an exaggeration. Like, that is actually what I did. All sorts of different cameras in all sorts of different contexts, but like taking pictures and thinking in like composition squares, like absolutely everywhere that I went. Like everything was like a frame line kind of view. And just like looking for interesting compositions in the world around me. And that's why I got good at photography. It's because I did it without relent, pretty much.
Hey, I mean, you did it in a very unique way, but that's the secret. You have to get your hours in of doing a certain thing to become really, really good at it. You see your life through the photography lens, through the compositional view of.
And that is more of a mindset than you think, because when I stopped doing photography, I really did stop thinking in that way. It was like I had taken off this performance that I was doing, and it really, as soon as it was off, I just stopped completely. Like it was just a professional thing from there, and I could put on that performance when it was a wedding day or something that we had a big job, and that was it. But now that I tend to have a camera with me all the time again, it's back to it. It's back to thinking about how I could be creative in a photographic way.
Creativity is so important. And there's a lot of people that don't get to express their creativity on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And I'm very fortunate that I've always been able to do that, or for the better part of my working life, I've been able to do that. And I'm glad that you're back to expressing creativity.
Unless I got locked into a 9 to 5 as it is, because at the moment I am unemployed. For the first section basically of my adult life, except I was injured at one point, but technically that's not unemployed. At least like I technically was still under the company, even though I wasn't getting paid for a bit. But I went to a bunch of job interviews as like a reflex, and I've almost lined myself up. Like I've already had 2 interviews, so I've gone through like 2 steps of the process to working with a company that does estimation for home restoration after wind damage and fire damage and floods and things like that. And I feel like I've done a really good job at selling myself to be the best candidate possible. And it's kind of this weird thing where I literally I'm going to be equally as happy if I get the job or not. Like I am ambivalent because I know that if I don't, there's something I really want to do that I can do and keep pushing myself to try to make
There's a
full-time income. Yeah.
There is a kind of
photography and marketing. And if I do get the job, the salary's pretty good. There's a company truck. There's lots of benefits associated with it. And of course, that's a more traditional and stable thing. Doesn't mean I have to stop the photography, although I'm kind of worried that it might just happen. So that's definitely a risk. Plus, it would be hard to take on other obligations during the week, which is typically when you would do other kinds of contract work for photography. So yeah, it does make a lot of trouble. At least weddings, always weekends. Pretty much always. I had a few Thursday weddings last year. I think those were out of desperation more than anything else.
Yeah, COVID desperation. No, that's I think about it every now and then about what I would do. I am every day that goes by become increasingly more and more unemployable.
Yeah.
Like there's such giant gaps in my resume. Not that I have been not doing anything.
I've come to think of the term unemployable more of a mindset, not a state of affairs. It's not because you have resume gaps and other things, because technically I feel like self-employment and the running of a business still something you should put on your resume.
Oh, I absolutely would, but it can't be my own reference is the problem.
That's easy enough. You can use customers as references. You can use anybody you like as references. That's the fun part. I made a reference list the other day for said interview, and like I picked people who actually knew what was happening. Like the retail cannabis job that I had located very, very close to where we are currently sitting. My boss doesn't know the first thing about what my day-to-day was like. So I used...
Your old boss doesn't know a lot of day-to-day.
Yeah, yes. I used a reference of basically salespeople from various companies, the POS company and other marketing agencies, and people that like I literally talked to on the phone almost every week. Because I would just we would cut through the sales bullshit in about 30 seconds, and then it would be on to just having, a fun conversation about whatever we were doing at the time. I feel like I made a lot of good connections at that point. I still talk to 2 of the people pretty regularly to this day, and they still message me on LinkedIn or whatever it is.
Good.
Yeah, there's always some people that stick out in every part of your life that you should hold on to, because there's like some kind of interesting connection that you could always fall back on at some point. Sometimes they like send me like job offers and stuff when I was looking for work, or to have a decent conversation once in a while. Nothing in common other than like a professional interest that kind of linked everything together. With you probably have a lot of people that you could like turn to if you needed a specific kind of service.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that do a lot of different things, and in certain situations, I have turned on to certain people, and in the future, I will continue to do so because they come to us for stuff, and we'll reciprocate accordingly.
Mm-hmm. That's It's an interesting thing when you kind of look at the way the tax code is written and just the way that like society set up in general. There's way more advantages to being a business owner than an employee. And it's sort of being pushed out of your comfort zone a little bit to like experience more diversity and interactions. Because if you just worked a 9 to 5 at a retail store, the type of client that comes in is kind of pre-selected based on the needs that they have, and the people that you're working with the same every day.
It's true.
Whereas here, you got somebody else coming in all the time, and it's not just a selling, I'm going to sell you something off the rack. It's literally working with a customer to create something. It's getting to know who they are and what they do throughout the process.
And what they need.
Yeah.
I mean, this morning, we're dealing with steel workers. This afternoon, we're dealing with a race car driver.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of, do you know what kind of racing he does?
No. I know his logo, and I know the clothing that he needs.
That's the funny thing, too. There's so many times in public or whatever, like people just try to strike up a conversation. Like I was in Costco yesterday buying a bunch of lollipops because I brought them I made a booth at one of the 420 expos put on by Tokyo Smoke in this case, but one of the lollipops for people to come and have something sweet while they're at our booth. But just in the line, just this guy was interested in, me carrying all these things out of there and whatever. And the first thing he says is, "Oh, do you something about the basketball?" And I'm like, "I don't know anything about basketball." And he's like, "Oh, well, what about this hockey thing?" I'm like, "I don't know anything about hockey." This sports is like a dynamic that so many people communicate on. And again, I don't respect the tradition of sports, I guess. I'm sure there's lots of autistic people that are really into sports, but that's not one of my hyperfixations. Isn't it? That's a funny thing too, that a lot of people on the spectrum fall into different categories, like they're car people, or they're like train people, or boat people, or like they have these fascinations. I could do a little bit with the car stuff. I have a general knowledge of pretty much everything that's on the market in the past like 30 years or more. I try to fix things myself because I'm interested in the mechanical workings of things, and I don't really have any kind of filter for just being concerned about that kind of stuff. I'll wing it, probably work out fine. But yeah, there's so many different hyperfixations that people have. It's kind of making the most of like just a different mindset, being less adaptable to general situations, but adapting yourself to more specific situations as a coping mechanism. Another feature that is definitely related to that for me is going on deep dives of information and finding out that the average person doesn't spend like every weekday night reading Wikipedia articles on every micro fascination that they have, trying to answer every question that's built into their minds because they don't really care.
I do it a lot.
That's good. It's a valuable thing to be in tune, but there's so many people in the world that literally do not seek new information. They're not interested in knowing more things. They don't have this thirst for knowledge that some other people have. And I feel like that's like my whole personality. It's just like a thirst for knowledge. Just want to know the most correct information possible. Yeah. Another thing I've noticed is that I do not necessarily get along better with other people who are on the spectrum. That is not a facilitator of connection in the slightest. In fact, it could be too much. Like, two people who can't maintain any eye contact, that just gets really uncomfortable. Because I can do it a bit, just not like full time. But yeah, two people now, you're just talking to the floor the whole time.
Well, to each their own.
Yeah, no, it's a wild world out there. You can kind of blame TikTok. I was listening to a content creator, Hank Green. You probably know who that is, yeah. He was going on about how he lives in Montana, the first state to officially ban TikTok. And as what he thinks is probably the biggest TikTok content creator in Montana, has been getting a lot of questions from, the press and whatever, just trying to get his take on it. And his take is interesting. It doesn't really seem like it's something that's going to be upheld, and it needs to be debated in many different kind of contexts, but I don't think it's going to stop anybody anytime soon. So weird that we're trying to ban a medium of expression just because it's too stimulating or something like that. Or if you listen to mainstream news, it's corrupting the children or something like that. I think TikTok's great.
I enjoy it.
Yep.
I go on it nightly. Well, not nightly, but at nighttime. I avoid it during the day because there is a deep dive aspect. So nighttime is the only time that I will utilize it. And so
the two benefits of it is, one, the algorithm is known for being essentially one of the best things.
It's solid.
Yeah, like just picking out who you are as a person and figuring out stuff you didn't even know about yourself just because of the patterns you have and the things you're interested in. Like, it's incredible. Like, my feed is just so matched what I'm into. And then every once in a while, you get the odd video where it's testing the waters. It's trying to see if you're going to try and pick it up on something else. And if you do, it'll latch onto that. It'll immediately okay, this guy's into this new thing. We're going to show him videos about it now. And the other thing is a feeling of being in tune with the world in a more authentic way. A lot of people are talking about how there's been all these protests worldwide and people are burning things down in the streets of Paris and there's a lot of stuff going on. And the censorship on platforms like Instagram is unbelievable. It is completely whitewashed. Whereas TikTok, right, you can see the garbage burning in the streets kind of thing. And it's amazing. You could say, okay, well, that's China trying to, I don't know, disrupt Western democracies or something. Maybe, but I'd rather know the truth. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to burn society down. Let's coordinate some shit if we're gonna do it. We'll use TikTok.
On that note, I know it's considerably shorter than we said we were going to do, but I have not a big emergency, but I gotta fly.
Okay. All right.
But this will be enough to test, and we'll
Yeah.
be back with guests.
Welcome to the abrupt end of our podcast.
I'm sorry.
No
I was
worries.
looking for a good way to end, but causing anarchy seems.
If you're seeing this, it probably worked. I think it'd be too shameful to upload it if we literally couldn't use the AI process we intended.
Yes, if it fails, you'll never see this. Perfect. We'll see you next time.
Signing off.